Hello, and welcome back to episode 3 of You Are Not Your Diagnosis. Today's episode is all about symptoms and what they mean. So, the traditional view of symptoms that many of us have is that they're just kind of noise from the body. And you may not have this viewpoint, but I'm kind of starting from the general view in our culture. But in today's episode, we're going to be talking more about how symptoms are actually communication from your body, how they're messages, and how you can begin to listen to the messages that your body has given you and how you can use that information. So if that sounds a little bit new to you, I'm going to be diving deeper into this topic and teaching you some things that you can actually do to start to have a new relationship with your body. But before we kind of dive into listening to the symptoms, I want to just have you think for a moment about what your typical response is when you have a symptom. And this can be a minor symptom, you have just a little bit of an upset stomach or a minor headache, or it could be a bigger symptom because if you're dealing with chronic illness, you may be feeling a lot of pain, you may be feeling fatigued. So whatever kind of symptoms you typically deal with, whether they're minor or major, I want you to think of what is your first response kind of on an average day to a symptom. So are you frustrated? Are you irritated? Do you feel sad? Are you angry? What is your emotional response to a symptom? So many of us have become kind of conditioned to feel like, symptoms are frustrating. We get angry. We think, why is this happening? Why is my body doing this? Why is my body being so noisy? So if you feel that way, you are totally not alone. And in fact, I want to start by sharing my own story because even though this is something that I teach, it's something that I still struggle with sometimes on a lived basis, not every day, but there are times when I have physical symptoms and I struggle with that initial feeling and that initial reaction. So I think about 4 or 5 months ago now, I started having some pain in my mouth, some pain in my teeth. And this is a completely new thing for me. Like I've never had really any problems with my mouth at all, any dental oral problems. But I woke up one day and I started kind of having this like odd sensation in the gums. And it kind of persisted. Like I just thought the first day I was like, that's kind of odd. And I wasn't overly irritated that first day. It was just like, this is weird. And as the pain persisted and then it kind of intensified and it was moving around and I couldn't really figure out what was happening, I remember starting to feel really frustrated and irritated by this. Like, why am I having another weird symptom? Because in my life, I've definitely had some symptoms that I'm like, what is this all about? This is kind of weird. Or having that feeling of, again, like, even though this is the message that I teach people is that symptoms have wisdom for us and they have messages for us, I still can sometimes go to that place of feeling a default feeling of frustration or anger or irritation. So if you feel those things, first of all, that's normal, but I want to, in this episode, share with you more about how to start to listen to that, how to come out of that first response of irritation and frustration and come into a new space with that and start to ask your body what it might be sharing with you through these messages. So let's start first, though, by talking a little bit about how we've become culturally conditioned, really, in Western society to view symptoms as annoying, frustrating, inconvenient. If you think about if you're watching television, how many commercials do you see on a regular basis for things like over-the-counter medications? How many times do you see something for like, have a stomach upset, here, take Pepto-Bismol, have a headache or backache, here, have some Tylenol or some Advil. So this is very culturally conditioned that we just view symptoms as something that we want to make go away quickly. And the best way to do that is with a pill. So I was looking at some statistics and I saw that there's a statistic estimated out there that 81% of people, like that's their first response to a minor symptom is to take something over the counter. And a lot of people in my world, that might not be the case, but if that's you, like there's no judgment on that. That's kind of how we become conditioned. But I want to teach you otherwise in this episode. So I want to start by saying that symptoms are really your body's way of communicating with you. Our bodies don't have words like we have words to talk to someone else. They only have the language of sensation, of pain, of discomfort, of symptoms, basically. Yes, it would be in many ways a lot more convenient if they could speak to us in words, but they don't have words. And so we have to learn to start to see symptoms as our body's intelligent communication to us. And instead of our first response being wanting to make it go away, getting frustrated and irritated, reaching for something over the counter that you can take or a prescription, if you deal with more serious pain, what if instead you could start to see that as intelligent communication from your body, and you could get curious about the message, and you could actually, more importantly, start to understand what that message is. And if that sounds a little bit out there and a new concept, that's okay. For some people, that might be a hard thing to initially hear, that the body is trying to give you messages. And for some of you, this might be landing perfectly, and you might say, yeah, it makes sense. I just maybe don't understand how to get that wisdom. So know that we're going to be talking a little bit more about how to listen to the body. But first, we really have to shift our mindset from feeling like, this is an inconvenience and a frustration and noise, ultimately, to understanding that it's intelligent communication and intelligent wisdom from the body. And then we have to actually start to have a conversation with our body. So in kind of the next portion of this episode, I'm going to be talking more about that, talking about how to start to listen. And I'm going to guide you through a little practice that you can use. You can do it while listening to this episode, and then you can kind of come back and use it as a tool in your toolbox, because I think it's really empowering ultimately to have tools in our toolbox rather than to just feel like we don't know what to do when we're struggling with a symptom. We don't know how to handle it and how to approach it. So let's start to explore a little bit of what it would look like then to listen to the body. How would we begin to listen to the body's messages? So let's do a little bit of an experiential process here. So if you're listening to this while you're driving, I'm not going to ask you to close your eyes, but maybe come back and listen to this at another time. But if you're in a safe space where you can close your eyes for a few minutes, go ahead and do that now and begin. We're going to just take a few nice, relaxed, deep breaths, inhaling through the nose and exhaling out through the nose. And just letting your day fall away to the background, letting yourself become more fully present to your body right now. Being present in this moment with what is. And take about 2 more nice deep breaths. And now we're going to begin to just kind of tune into the body. So if you already have an area that's kind of giving you messages, it's being loud, it's talking to you, you feel symptoms with it, you can just start there. But if you're kind of feeling fairly good today, we'll just take a few moments to just scan through your body. So kind of from the top of your head, working your way down and noticing any areas that might be feeling tension, discomfort, just a sense of something being off in that area. And I'll give you just another few moments to just scan through your body and find that place. We're going to find one place right now to work with. So when you find that place, whether you had it at the beginning or you've scanned through now, like picking the place that feels like it most wants your attention. And I'm going to have you then bring your focus to that area. So I'll use an example for me right now. My neck is the area that's wanting my attention. And what I would have you say is to whatever area, but I'll use the neck as the example. Neck, what is it that you would like me to know right now? What is your message and your wisdom for me right now? and I get quiet. Just be quiet for a moment after you've asked your question. And just see if anything pops in, any words, any images, any sense of something. And if you don't immediately get a sense of something, like just coming back, taking a few breaths and asking the question again. You might have to ask it a few times. I'm just going to give you a moment to tune in and quiet. And if you've received that message, thanking your body for sharing with you. And then asking a second question. So it's shared what it needs you to know, but what does it need from you? So ask that area. I would say, for example, neck, what do you need from me right now? And again, just being quiet and allowing the answer to just emerge. And again, if you don't get anything in that first instant, just ask the question again, several times gently, and be patient. Take another few moments just to see if an answer wants to emerge. And then when you're ready, you'll just come back. So I want to share with you that if you've done this, as I just guided you through, and you didn't get anything the first time, that might not be uncommon if you've never done this before. So don't get frustrated. Don't say this doesn't work. I would like you to try it several times over several days because it's a skill. And if you've never done it before, it's going to take a little bit of time. And it's also partly building a new relationship with your body through this. So the first few times you may do it, your body might not answer you because for a while you may have been kind of shutting down, listening to your body. Your body may be trying to communicate with you, but you've been irritated, frustrated, just trying to make the symptom go away very quickly. And so ultimately, your body may need a little time to build trust. So you can use the idea like you are building a new relationship or a friendship with your body. Your body isn't always going to instantly jump into that feeling of trust with you. Instead, it may take time. So just do this several times and be patient because that's a key part of this. Don't get frustrated. Don't jump into irritation or like, why am I not getting the answer energy? Instead, just be like, okay, I didn't get the answer today and that's okay. So ultimately, this is just a starting place to start to build a new relationship with your body and to start getting curious about the symptoms, about what your body is trying to say to you, because there's a lot of wisdom there. So I want to share a story with you of kind of how this played out for me, how I first sort of came to this understanding of the body talking to me. So this was probably about 6 years ago now. I developed a pain in my left knee one day, and the pain came sort of very suddenly. I hadn't physically injured myself, fallen down, banged into anything. Nothing had happened to my left knee. I just woke up one day and it started hurting. And so again, kind of as in the case of my teeth, I was like, what's going on here? I don't understand. And I was a little irritated, to be honest. And the pain kind of continued on and on and on. And I was already in the world of holistic and alternative medicine. So because I knew I hadn't physically injured it, I wasn't going to go see a doctor to have it checked out because I knew there was structurally nothing wrong. And I wasn't going to start just taking pain medications to just suppress the pain because I was like, that doesn't really resonate for me either. So I was going for acupuncture and massage, and I had the chiropractor check it out, and I was doing movement work, movement therapy in the form of yoga therapy for it, and it still wouldn't really resolve. And this started to go on for a number of months. And so I started to get really frustrated because it was like I felt like I was doing the right things, but the pain would only improve a little bit. It wouldn't incrementally get better. So I kept having the sense with the pain that it was like my body was talking to me. Like, this was one of my first kind of ideas of like, it felt like literally the pain was like a voice in my knee speaking a message to me, but I couldn't understand the message. I had no clue what it was trying to say to me, because it was like it was speaking a language I didn't speak, like Japanese or Chinese or whatever language, like left knee, I didn't speak it. And it was frustrating for several months because I kept having this sense, but it was like, how am I supposed to understand what it's saying? So this was actually part of the story of how body talk, I first experienced the modality of body talk. Because after a few months, I had this remembering that I had met a woman who did something that she called body talk. I had met her a year before, basically, to when this had happened. And I wasn't quite sure what exactly she did. She told me, and it sounded interesting, but I didn't really know exactly what it meant. But I was getting more and more desperate. And since I was describing the pain, like my knee was talking to me, I thought, well, maybe she can translate for me. So I went in and I had a session with her. And in that session, she asked a question, whether I had just experienced trauma right before this had happened. And in that moment, it was like a light bulb went on, because I hadn't made this connection for myself at all in my kind of 3-month struggle with this. I remembered that right before the pain started, my dad had come, and actually both my parents had come to stay with me in Portland. My dad was going through a period of depression and anxiety, and they were seeking a second opinion at a major medical center near me. And so they were with me for about 2 weeks, and it was a very intense 2 weeks because it was hard to see him so depressed. It was hard to see him struggling. And ultimately, we weren't really getting clear answers. So they left and they went home. And I had taken 2 weeks away from working on my business and serving clients, because I wanted to be there for my family and be present. And I immediately jumped back into work mode. I immediately jumped into feeling like I had to start, serving clients and marketing and doing all the things. And what had happened was my body and my left knee had been trying to get my attention that what had happened right before the pain was a trauma. When my parents were staying with me and all this happened, that I was going through a trauma. And that I hadn't processed that trauma was ultimately the key thing, because my body was trying to just call me back to that moment and let me know, hey, there's unprocessed emotion here, and you need to come back to this and release the emotion and release the trauma and acknowledge what just happened, because I was kind of just jumped from one thing to another. And that's very common in our world, right? We jump from one thing to another. And ultimately, I just was trying to get stuff done. Well, as soon as that had come up in the session, and as soon as we did kind of a technique that helped to clear the emotion that I still felt from the 3 or 4 months ago when my parents had been there, and all of the kind of the grief and the fear and the stress and all of those things that were still held in my body, the pain went away. I literally got up off of the table at this appointment, and the pain was, I would say, 95 to 100% gone, just like that, after months and months. And so it was very powerful for me, because I realized that my body had been trying to call me back to this and to share some wisdom with me and share that I needed to heal. And so therefore, without that pain and without that problem not resolving, I would have just been carrying that traumatic experience unprocessed. So ultimately, what we don't heal and what we don't process in terms of trauma and emotion, our body will store for us. And it often stores it in the connective tissue, in places of kind of where there's weakness or previous injury in the body. So whatever we have that's unprocessed, the body holds on to it. There's a book out there, I think, that's about trauma that says the body keeps the score. And that's so true. So when we start to view the messages that our body is giving us, rather than noise, annoying, frustrating, irritating, inconvenient, whatever that is, whatever your initial reaction was when we started talking about this, whatever you thought what your default is, if you see it differently from that reaction and you instead start to realize, no, my body is actually trying to help me. It's trying to share some information with me. She's trying to share some wisdom with me. It's a totally different ball game because you start to work with your body. You start to be on the same team as your body. And instead of just trying to suppress things, which is, when we take medications, it doesn't really resolve what was going on in the first place, like why you're having that symptom. It just kind of makes the symptom be quiet, like a mute button. And I like to use the analogy there, then it becomes like a game of whack-a-mole. So the more you suppress a symptom in one place, it finds another place to pop up because the message is still there in the body. The body is still trying to get your attention and share that wisdom with you. So, if you make the headache go away, then it might show up as a stomach upset or a pain somewhere else in your body or difficulty sleeping or whatever, however your body is going to try next to get your attention. And we've become such a culture where we're conditioned to just push one symptom down in one place and then, push another one down. And this even happens right with medications because medications give you side effects and then you take another medication for the side effect, which then probably gives you more side effects that you have to take more medications for. So we're chasing our tails instead of getting to the root of it. And the root really that I want to talk about in sharing my wisdom today is the root is the message that the body is trying to give us. The body is incredibly intelligent. And the body doesn't want to be sick. It doesn't want us to hurt. It doesn't want all of those things, but it really only has those ways of trying to get our attention, those ways of calling us back to our problem, and those ways of drawing us back to the fact that there's something that really needs to heal. So instead of getting frustrated, irritated, angry, annoyed, maybe feeling even sadness or grief, like, oh, here's a symptom again, like, again, like I'm always struggling. Just taking a moment to realize that this is actually your body's intelligent communication to you. And if you take the time to learn how to listen to that intelligent communication and listen to its whispers, then it doesn't have to start to get louder and louder and scream, or it doesn't keep popping up in other places. So it's really a process of learning how to listen to that wisdom when it's small. And ultimately when it's small, when symptoms are small or when health problems are small, it's easier to resolve than when they've gotten bigger and deeper roots. So this is another reason that I get so passionate about kind of starting more of a prevention approach or dealing with a health issue when it's just beginning. Because many times if we just ignore it and we say, I'll deal with it later, it's not that big of a deal, I don't have time for it, whatever that excuse is, well, it's going to just start getting louder and louder and bigger and bigger. And the image I keep seeing in my mind is like a weed. So how easy is it to pull a weed when the roots are really shallow, when the weed is small? Usually you can just walk in there and just yank it right out, right? It's easy. But when the weed, it grows and the roots get really deep and the roots tangle with other things or they grow under your sidewalk, it's really hard to get that weed out. And so ultimately, when we get to that point where something's big and harder, bigger, scarier, louder in terms of our health, it's harder to deal with it. And I want to just take a moment to say that's not to blame you if you're already at that place of the symptoms are bigger and louder. Like sometimes we miss that. Like I didn't listen. If you listen to episode 1 with my story, I didn't listen to when I was anxious and depressed and not feeling 100% and fatigued and panic attacks and headaches in my graduate school experience. And so my body ultimately got really loud and screamed at me. And so, and I don't feel shame or blame of myself for that. Like that was the path I needed to take. So don't be hard on yourself. And sometimes you've been trying to resolve the issue for a while and you haven't found the right resources. There's lots of reasons that it could get bigger and scarier. But if you're someone who's listening and you're not currently dealing with a chronic illness, then take the time to resolve an issue now while it's smaller and it's easier. So, and this technique that I taught you in this episode, you can come back to time and time again, like be it small symptoms, big symptoms, start building a relationship with your body. Because sometimes when we ask that second question of, what do you need from me right now, body? The answer can be quite simple. Like with a headache, sometimes it's just you're dehydrated. Or my sense of my neck is I've been spending a lot of time with this podcast and spending a lot of time at my desk, which is a little bit more than I'm used to. And so I'm having to kind of balance that out and take care of my body. Like today, I'm going to go to the chiropractor because I can sense that my body just needs some attention there. So I know what the message really is for my body, and ultimately by giving my body what it needs, and I'm not going to spend most of the rest of today at my desk, which is going to be great for my body. By giving it what it needs, I know the pain will go away. And if you're saying, okay, well, like I also, some of these messages, I didn't say this back when we did the technique, and I said, sometimes you'll have to do this multiple times because I jumped into the story of my left knee. Sometimes we need help, as that story illustrates. So I was trying really hard when the knee pain started for me to figure out what was going on. And I was trying all the things that I knew in the beginning to help. But ultimately, it was not until I had that body talk session and had someone who could facilitate that process and kind of ultimately act as like a translator for my body that I could get the answer. In the beginning, I couldn't get that answer for myself. So that's also something that I want to share with you here, is that sometimes we do need help in finding the solution. As there's a famous saying out there, like sometimes you can't see like your own blind spots. I mean, you can't get your own messages. You can't, sometimes we're in our own filters and our own bubble. We see the world through the way we've always seen it. And so sometimes those messages won't come. So ultimately, if you try that technique that I shared with you and you do it repeatedly and you're still kind of feeling like, I don't really know what, I still am getting nothing. Like I had the sense of my left knee talking, but it was like a foreign language. So if you feel like you're still kind of getting gibberish or a language you don't speak, then it might be time to find someone to help you. And that's one of the things that I help clients with in the work that I do, which is more of a facilitated process of that, of me tuning in. Like I had in that session on my knee, she tuned in and she saw the story and the message from my body. So sometimes you need someone to help you receive that message. But ultimately, we want to start to shift the way that we see symptoms. We want to shift out of this paradigm that views symptoms as annoying, frustrating, inconvenient. Part of the problem is we live in a world that's very busy and we're focused in our culture on productivity. And so symptoms get to be like, oh, well, I've got things to do. I'm busy. I don't have time for this. I need to get back to what I need to do. And, hurry up. I don't have time for this. So we need to shift out of that paradigm of seeing symptoms as that inconvenience and that time suck, and instead start to respect them as intelligent wisdom from our body, intelligent communication. And then we get curious about that. We make time. I would say that practice that I shared in the middle of today's episode is something you can do for yourself daily. It doesn't have to be a big, long, half-hour practice. It could be 5 minutes of quiet where you do that practice for yourself and you build it like a muscle or a habit and you start to develop it. Because ultimately, you're opening a door for a new relationship with your body, and you're shifting your mindset around symptoms from seeing them as just noise or inconveniences, frustrations, to seeing them as intelligent communication. And when you do that, then you start to develop that new relationship with your body, and your body can share its wisdom. So symptoms aren't just noise. But they don't mean that your body is also just broken. Your body is ultimately trying to share wisdom with you, and it's trying to heal. We'll talk more about how the body always wants to heal in another episode. But the message that I want to share that's relevant here is the body doesn't want to cause pain or to be sick or to be out of balance, but that's oftentimes the only way it can make something known, the only voice it has to bring those sorts of things to the surface. So as you come away from this episode, I encourage you to start just making a new practice and a new habit for yourself of listening to your body's wisdom. Come back to that practice and, of getting quiet, breathing, finding the area you want to focus on and asking it, what does it need you to know? What's its message? And what does it need from you today? And if you have more questions that you want to ask, that's totally fine. But those are kind of my two basic starting ones that I like to begin with. Do it daily. Do it daily for at least a week, especially if you're not getting anything, so that you keep giving the body the opportunity and you keep inviting the body to have a new conversation with you, a new relationship with you, and to open up and share with you. And I'd be curious then what happens for you when you do that. You'll probably start to notice you'll get a little bit more. And our bodies communicate to us in different ways. Our intuition speaks to us all in different ways. So it could be pictures, words, a sense, a knowing, a feeling, whatever that is. So don't think it has to be one way, because your body may give you the message in different ways. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's episode. And until next time, I'll see you in health.